Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your attention. My name is Tomas Marquez, and today I'll be talking to you about managing behaviors in the music classroom. So I want to start by talking a little bit about who I am. I'm a music teacher with over 13 years of experience teaching piano and general music classes to students with disabilities and autism, also with typical students. I have a Master of Music in Music Education with concentration in music and autism from the Boston Conservatory at Berklee. Right now, I teach the elementary level general music at BPS, Boston Public Schools, and I also teach piano and music technology at the Berklee Institute for Arts and Special Needs. So our agenda for today, I'm going to start with talking about what is a behavior, defining the why and the how of behaviors. Then I'm going to talk about classroom management, what it is. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about both classroom management and behavior put together. And after that, I'm going to give you 5 strategies, 5 classroom management strategies, and some examples that I use in my practice. And at the end, I'm going to give you some books and references that I'm going to be using throughout the presentation in case you have to read more or know more about this. So let's start with behavior. What is a behavior? Because if we want to change or we want to stop behaviors in our classroom, we need to know what they are. So basically, behavior is what people do and say. It needs to be an action, a person's action, and has to be measurable. You need to be able to describe and observe the behavior. And this is very important in terms to know what a behavior is. You need to be able to observe and to measure the behavior. It has an impact in the environment. In our case, is the music classroom. Behaviors in a music classroom have an impact in our class and on other students' learning. They are lawful, and lawful in this term means rules, follow behavioral rules. And they can be overt or covert, external or internal. So let's talk a little bit about why and how of behavior. Why behavior occur and how. So basically, the why is what we call the functions of behavior. They are divided into socially and not socially mediated. They need a person to deliver the reinforcement. I'm going to talk about that. What is reinforcement? About that in a bit. And the behavior, the not socially, the behavior is delivered, the reinforcement is delivered by their own behavior. So in the socially mediated, we have escape or avoid a situation, gain attention, access to tangible or activities. And in the not socially mediated, we have automatic reinforcement. That is when the behavior itself delivers the reinforcement. In my opinion, and this is my opinion and the opinion of other music teachers I have talked about this, most, but not all, of the behaviors that I see encounter in my classes tend to be about attention seeking or lack of engagement, which is task avoidance. Like I said, it is my opinion, most of them tend to fall into one of these 2 categories, although not all of them. So how the behavior occurs, and to be able to define how they occur, we need to know about the ABC of behavior. A means antecedent. Antecedent, in my opinion, antecedent is one of the most important things in a behavior because if you know that what is the trigger of that behavior, you're going to be able to avoid it in most circumstances. So antecedent is the stimulus that triggers a behavior. For example, it could be a setting, it could be a person, the action of a person, it can be a smell, it could be a sound, it can be the time of the day, it can be the activity. It's whatever happens just before the behavior occurs. The behavior itself, like it says, it needs to be an action, observable, and measurable. And the consequence is whatever happens right after the behavior. Now, in this case, consequences, don't think about the meaning of the word in the traditional sense that if you do something wrong is going to happen to you. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just the consequence of the behavior. Whatever happens right after behavior is a consequence of the behavior. And consequences can do one of two things. It can either increase the behavior or decrease the behavior. If it increases the behavior, we call it reinforcing, because it reinforces the behavior to keep it happening more and more. If it decreases the behavior, we call it punishment. And again, don't think about the traditional meaning of the word punishment. We're talking about something that punishes the behavior so it doesn't happen again, something that tends to decrease the likelihood of that behavior to happen again. That's what, in this context of behavior, punishment means. So let's talk about what classroom management is. So basically, practices that a teacher follows to ensure that students behave in a way that is not disruptive or interrupts the learning of other students, and that let you basically teach your class. Teachers are able to focus on academically relevant material. So basically, classroom management is attend to the disruptive behaviors of students and practices that let you teach your class. So what's important of classroom management? One of the most important aspects is being able to manage your classroom, have group control, so you can teach your class and other students can learn. And they're not being distracted by behaviors of other students. Without classroom management, no learning can occur. It's very difficult for students to learn and pay attention to the class. And also you as a teacher to teach the class, there's a lot of behaviors, adverse behaviors happening in your classroom. So your classroom management is going to be your foundation of your class. If you don't have group control, if you don't have good classroom management, you're not going to be able to do your job. You're not going to be able to teach your music class. So classroom management and behavior. Behaviors, in my experience, and this applies to typical students and students with disability, behaviors are for communicating something. Your students are trying to communicate something. If it isn't the case of students with disabilities, in the case that they are nonverbal, behaviors are going to be their form of communicating things to you. Okay, if you're talking about typical students, behaviors in the classroom tends to be they're trying to communicate something to you in terms that I don't feel well, or I don't like what's going on, I'm bored, things like that. This needs to be, classroom management needs to be constant. It doesn't end. It starts the first day of school and then it ends the last day of school. And when the students come back next year, it starts over again from the first day to the end. And you need to be able to do this, keep it going, maintenance, every day, every class, keep that maintenance going, because although you will be able to diminish behaviors, they will come back. There's a big probability that they will come back. So you need to keep that maintenance, you keep that reinforcing and reteaching and reminding the students the expectations of the classroom. And last, not all teachers are going to have the same behavior challenges with their students. And we see that with our classrooms. Not all classrooms behave the same way. Some groups have sets of behaviors, another group may have another set of behaviors, and you may have to address those behaviors differently. So not two teachers are going to have the same types of group behaviors. So last, I would like to give you 5 classroom management strategies that I took from an article. They are, the first one is clear expectations and rules, predictable and structured routines, positive and specific praise to reinforce behaviors. This is very important. Respond consistently and proportionally to inappropriate behaviors. And last, maintain high levels of engagement, which I think is probably the most important one of all 5. So I'm going to try to give you quickly some examples of each one of those and talk a little bit about them. So the first one, I grouped the first and the fourth one together because they basically relate to the same thing: expectations and rules, and how to respond when they don't follow them. So for example, these 5 steps I took from an article. All the articles and all the references are going to be at the last slide with some books that I read and I used for this presentation. So a warning will be given to the student from the teacher. And this is something that I do. If, for example, if a student is talking, I would just give him one warning, like, hey, you're talking, you're distracting the students, you're not letting me teach. I need you, and I go with him again through the expectations and the rules of the classroom, that you need to be quiet, you need to pay attention. If the student keeps talking, then there's a consequence that they already know, because we talk about this from the first day of school, the first day. So I will either give him a break at the back of the room where I have a break area, or I would give the student a break outside the room, and I would tell him, I think you need to take a break from the classroom. I'm going to give you 5 minutes aside so you can calm down, think about what happened, and I'm going to come back and ask you if you're ready to come in. Most of the time, when I come back, I ask them, they're ready to come in. Sometimes they tell me, no, I need more time. And after that, he's okay to come back to the classroom. If that keeps going and going and going, then I may have to talk. Sometimes I talk to a teacher and we can resolve it within the homeroom teacher. And me, sometimes I have to call the parents and tell me, hey, your son, your daughter, they're talking in class, have a talk with him. The fourth and fifth one, I think I have done that one maybe twice in my career with typical students. With students with disabilities, it's different, because you may have to be more lenient in terms of behavior. And I'm going to explain that a little bit. For example, I'm going to give you an example. If you have students with autism, for example, and they need breaks constantly throughout the class because they need to liberate some energy, right? You may encounter that all of a sudden the student may just start jumping around the classroom, and that it's something that the student needs to liberate that energy. So you may give him a break outside the classroom and he may come back. So in terms of special students with disability, you need to think a little bit different in terms of behavior, because the behaviors may be a consequence of the condition, right? So you need to think a little bit different about that. Now, this is very quickly, these are my roles in my classroom: be respectful, musical, and safe. I talk with my students the first day of class, and I ask them, what do you think respectful means, musical and safe in the music class? And we talk about this the first class, and they know. And then if they earn all 3 at the end of the class, which I ask them, do you think you earned a respectful pom-pom today? And they raise your hand, yes or no. So they decide if they earn those at the end of the class. And if they fill their bucket, right, with 15 pom-pom throughout several classes, they get a reward. It could be a game day, it could be a dance party, YouTube games. So this is one way to reinforce those rules and expectations. Predictable structure and routines. This is also very important with students with disability and typical students who have a very predictable, very clear structure in your classes and follow it every time, every class. Don't deviate from it, because that is going to give them security. They're going to know exactly what is the expectation for each class, and that's going to help reduce behaviors. For example, and this is one example, when the students, the arrival routine I have with them, I greet them at the door, they do a lot outside, and then I go through them the expectations, how to walk into the classroom and what to do once you get into the classroom. And I do this every class with every day with all my students. And this is some examples about my routine. The one on the left is the one I used to do with students with disability. It's a shorter routine, just 4 steps, 4 parts of the class. The one on the right is the one I do with more typical students. It has more parts. And with both of them, in both cases, I go at the beginning of the class, I go through each part of the class and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, so they know exactly what is going to happen that day. These are some positive reinforcements that you can use in your class. I use a lot of stickers because they work. I also use a lot of verbal praise. The bucket filler, the pom-pom, the example I just showed you. At one point, I used another reinforcement. If they earn all 3 pom-poms in the music class, at the end of the music class, I would show them a mystery instrument. And they love that. They really love that. And that worked very good. If you cluster your points, you can use that. Some teachers use stickers or chart. The bucket filler rewards that I just told you could be a dance party game. Some students, especially a student with disability, like just to rest. I would turn off the light, put some soft music, turn on some color lights in the classroom, and they would love that. I also use Quiet Coyote, or I would use this sign like peace and quiet, and reinforce the students that are following me, are following that expectation. You can use, I also heard about teachers using levels in the classroom, like level 0. The students already, when the teacher says level 0, the students know they have to be quiet. Level 1, level 2 is talking, volume. Level 3 can be like when we're singing. Level 4 is the volume you use with your voice when you're outside the classroom. And again, some consequences that I use in my classes, and I try to, when I talk about consequences with my students, I try to use it in a positive way. Like I want to give you a break. When I tell the student, the attitude is, I want to give you a break so you can calm down and come back to the class. Okay, so it's not like I'm kicking you out of the classroom. No, it's like I'm gonna give you a break so you can calm down and come back to the classroom and be part of the class again. So that's how I see the consequences. And last, engagement. Maintain high levels of engagement. One of the best ways of maintaining engagement is creating positive and trusting relationship with your students. And this can be done in different ways. For example, one of the ways that I used to create a more close relationship with my students was, for example, at lunch, I would go out and play a little bit of basketball with them at lunch break, right? And then they would see me in kind of a different environment, and we will interact in a different way. And when we come back to the classroom, they are more receptive to the class, and they're more receptive to my instructions and what I expect from them in the class. Also, you can just talk to them outside the classroom or get interested in what they're interested. With students with disability, sometimes I would go to their classrooms and just interact with them in other classes if I have the time, and get to know them in a different environment and a different aspect of their life that is not only the music class. Like I said, we talk about behaviors of formal communication, and above all, engagement is about your lesson plan, your class, how interested you're going to make your class, you're going to develop your class so that you can keep that engagement with your students. And one example that I use in my class, this is from a colleague teacher that gave me those to use in my class. This is Pokemon rhythms. So when I told my students that we were going to do Pokemon rhythms, they were super excited, that class. And throughout the activity, the engagement level of the students was through the roof. They were super engaged in this because this is something that they like. This is something that they're interested in. And we did rhythms with the name of the Pokemons, and they loved it. So this is one way in which you can diminish behaviors by using things that our students like or are interested in your class to boost the engagement levels of your students. And this is something that I used to do with typical students and students with disability. Not this same activity with students with disability, maybe not with high support students, but use something that the student likes and incorporate that into your class. And that is going to help with the engagement of your students. So these are books that I have read and I use in my class, and I also hear in this presentation. They're all very good books. Some of them have different approaches. They'll have very good examples, suggestions, and strategies for your classroom and your students. And these are the references for the books and also the articles that I use in this presentation. So thank you very much for your time and your attention. I hope that this presentation is useful to your class, to your students, to your professional teaching class, and thank you.